Hey friends, Monodux here. Welcome to another edition of Patch Files. I want to give a big shout out to Discipline Commotion, whose questions brought us the topic for today. Thank you very much. And I also want to give a shout out to Tony Murphy, who has also been commenting on that discussion. It's really wonderful to see people help each other out, and that's what this community is all about. So thank you both for your engagement. I also want to give a shout out to OZ Hall, who contributed to the discussion on the West Coast patch. OZ Hall is always full of wonderful information, and if you haven't checked out his channel, you really should. You will learn a lot, as I always do. So I'll put links to the channels for Discipline Commotion and OZ Hall in the description of this video. What I understand is that Tony Murphy actually has a similar system to what I have. So if enough of us comment and ask him to post a video, we might convince him to do it. Love to hear what you're doing, Tony. Alright, so let's get into the topic for today. We're going to talk about integrating the Behringer System 55 and 2500. The good news is they work great together. I think there's no major issues, and I think you'll have a wonderful time if you decide to mix these two systems. So let's just get right into patching. It's kind of a given for me on most of my patches is that I'm running MIDI CV from the CM1A module. I usually run a cable around the back of the case and into the oscillator controller over here on the left. So I'm going to stick to that today. Let's start by sending CV from the oscillator controller into a 2500 module. I'm just going to patch that in. So that's running into the keyboard input. And then I'm going to go out from the oscillator into the filter. I've selected a sine wave here to start with. Alright, I'm running into the filter, and we're just making a basic synth patch, so pretty standard fare. I'm going to use the low pass filter, run that into my VCA, so that's system 2500 into a system 55. And then from the VCA, actually I'm going to switch to this one over here. And from the VCA out to the world. And let's just check. Yep, we've got a signal. And my Arturia keyboard is controlling it. All is well. So, I've said in previous videos that the envelope generators on the 2500 system are not particularly to my liking. You do get dual envelope generators. However, they only receive one gate input, which to me is not the best. So that's why I don't have any of them in my setup. I'm just using the System 55 envelopes for that. So Behringer, if you hear us, please do consider re-releasing those envelopes with dual trigger inputs, one for each side. If you do that, I will probably get a DADSR for whatever my opinion's worth. And OZ Hall, I'll mention again, posted a video. I'll try to put a link in the description for this about an expander module for those. So there is a solution where you can get separate triggers for each side of it. I was completely unaware of that, so that's awesome. I will put that link in the description. Okay, so we've got our basic patch, and now we need to control it with an envelope. One of the difficulties in the System 55 is that the envelopes are driven by S-Triggers, unlike most other systems today, so that can be kind of challenging. What I'm going to do is take an S-Trig directly from the CM1A module, and then that will send trigs from my key presses and now control the VCA. Alright, so we've got your basic synth patch up and running. So I want to dive into some additional functionality. I'm going to use, first off, the 2500 sequencer, the clocked sequential control module 1027, just to send some voltages to the oscillator and also send gates to the envelope. So bearing in mind, this is something that you really want to keep in mind. These envelopes always need S-triggers. So if your patch isn't working, you may want to think backwards from that point. So to get an S-trig, because this is not going to send out S-trigs, I need to convert this. So that's what the interface module is for. Once more, Behringer, if you hear us, this massive beast of an interface module, I think it could be improved upon. And what I would suggest is that you take something similar to your form factor on the mixer and provide 4 separate V-trig to S-trig converters in a row. Put your audio to V-trig converter up top, and then throw in some multiples. You guys have the ingenuity to do that, and I think it would be awesome. That is something else I would buy. Okay, back to back to the patch. So we need an S-trig, so I'm going to take S-trig out, and that S-trig is going to be fed by the clock out from my clock sequential control. V-trig to S-trig. Alright, so we've got it triggering the gates. And then what I need is to throw in some, I'm going to turn that all the way down, throw in some signal for the oscillator. I'm going to use a super long cable over here. I'm just going to take channel A, which has a super inspiring melody, and I'm running it into the oscillator controller over here. This is a System 55 oscillator controller. Controlling the 2500 oscillator. So if I turn this on, you're not going to hear it because I haven't engaged it yet. So I'm going to throw the switch. And now we have gate and CV control. Because my keyboard switch is still operative, I can transpose that. So that works great. Another thing that you can do is I've got 2 sequencers, so if you want to clock those together, I'm going to start by clocking the 2500 and then I'm going to switch it. So what I need then is the oscillator running on my 960 sequencer, and where we get the clock from is the oscillator output. So let's run the oscillator output into the step. Now what this isn't doing, it's advancing it, but it's not giving us gates. So if I take this clock out, and actually what I'm going to do, let's use a multiple. So I'm going to take this oscillator output, run it into a multiple, and this is going to tell my 1027 to advance. And then it's also going to tell my gate to open. So now I'm clocking this from the 960. And it works just fine. Fully integrated. Okay, so let's just do the reverse. So I've got a different melodic sequence here on the 960, And let's see what we can do to get that out into the world. So for my 960 sequence, I don't really need to continue controlling the oscillator from the clock sequential control, so I'm going to use row A on my 960. And I want to control the clock of the 960 from the 1027. Okay, so to control the 1027, control the 960 with the 1027, I'm going to take a clock out from the 1027 and run it into the shift function of the 960. I'm going to reset both of these back to 1. And I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but we now have clocked control going the other way. So let's, we've got our VCO still connected. We need to reconnect this for a gate. So I'm going to take a clock out from the 1027, and actually let me get a longer cable here. And I want to control two things with that clock. I want to control the timing of the sequential controller, and I also want to control the envelope generator. So I'm going to run into some multiple here. I've got my clock out from the 1027, and from the 1027 I want to run into the control of timing, the shift below the control of timing on the 960. I'm going to reset this back to 1, reset that back to 1, and let's see if we've got shifting going on. Oscillator off. Okay, so I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but now I've got time control coming from the 2600 into the 960, and if I stop that, this stops because I'm not using the oscillator. Also, because I'm not using the oscillator, I don't have anything to trigger that gate. So that's where this multiple comes back in. So I'm taking a multiple. One connection is running the control of timing on the 960, and the other is now going to trigger the gate. All right, so we're good there. Alright, so the 1027 is now controlling the 960. It's also controlling the envelope generator. Remember that you do need to have a S-Trig for that. One of the things that I like about the 2500 oscillators is that you can mix waveforms. And I think the system is really well designed. So I kind of think of the System 55 as like a bread and butter modular synth, whereas the 2500 is a little bit more esoteric in my opinion. So what I'm going to do is mix in a triangle wave from that oscillator. Just throw the switch, and what you'll notice is the level goes down. But fortunately, I have an input gain on my filter. And that's a totally different tone. Totally different from what, say, a triangle by itself would be. And it's great that you can boost the levels. So we've been using, kind of standard patches so far. Let's see if we can do some modulation. So I'm going to use a sine wave LFO from the System 55, and I'm going to use this control voltages module, but instead of running into the System 55 filter, I'm going to run into the multi-mode 1047. So let's get... see, that's probably not going to reach. Alright, let's go sine wave output. I'm going to send it into control voltages. This is control voltage number 1. And then I'm I'm going to run my output into FCV1. And I'm going to turn it up. Et voila, we have voltage control. Since I'm using that control voltage as module, I can throw in some additional stuff. Let's do sample and hold. I'm going to go from there into input 2, and if I throw the switch, I could do one or the other, or both. Pretty cool. But I could also separate those, so I can have, let's actually do a multiple. Let's do this. We're gonna do multiple things with the LFO, so I'm gonna run one of those into the frequency CV. Let's do another one into FCV2. Oh, actually, let's do it into QCV. Alternatively, you could also run, excuse me, I took out the, you could also run this into the control voltages. And from there into the multiple. Let's do a little cable. So now we got filter cutoff and resonance, and sample and hold. And if you don't like how much that is, you can run it into the input with an attenuator. And turn it on. So you got options. Pretty cool. It all works very seamlessly together. Let's do, I'm using CV from the 960 timing from the 1027, but let's add a melody row. Let's see, I may need a longer cable for that. So I'm going to use channel A. I'm just going to run directly into this. I'm using the link frequency on this. Just using that oscillator there, and another basic patch. Let's take a triangle wave out. And go into the System 55 filter. Let's run that signal out over to another amp. And from that amp out to the world. Oh, with a longer cable. Okay, so I've got voltage control set up, but once again I need to trigger an envelope to control that amp. So let's set that up, bearing in mind the need for an S-Trig. I'm going to send that into my envelope into my VCA, and we've already got a multiple of the clock, so let's just run that into the V-Trig in. Oops, sorry for bumping the mic there. I'm going to drive that a little bit. This multi-mode filter resonator is fantastic. I really love it. So there you go. We've got a System 2500 oscillator running into a 2500 filter, running into a 55 VCA controlled by a 55 envelope generator, from a sequence from a 960 sequencer, which is being clocked by the 1027 sequencer, which is also sending a second sequence to our other oscillator. And it all works seamlessly and perfectly. So yeah, it works great, and I'm having loads of fun. I think if you decide that you want to expand your System 55 with some 2500 modules, you are on the right path, or vice versa. They're all going to work fantastically together. So thanks for taking this time to hang out, and if you have any questions, please do throw them in the comments. If you'd like to see some deep dive comparisons, say between the 2500 and 55 oscillators, or the functions of the sequencers, or anything like that, say so in the comments. This whole video came from a question in the comments originally. I'd love to hear from you, and love to be able to, for us all to work together to provide this information to the community. Anyway, thanks again for your time. Appreciate you watching, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.